the F1 Focus Podcast with Welman and Huw Griffin.
Welcome back to F1 Focus with Huw Griffin, and this week we're going to be talking about sentiments and temperaments and personalities and what it takes to be a champion in modern day Formula One. So before we get to that, please remember to hit that subscribe button. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers as soon as we possibly can, so thank you for your help. And with that out of the way, welcome you. This is an interesting one. You've been laying into Lando lately with your shorts. I'm interested to hear why you're saying you don't think Lando can be a champion.
Yeah, good afternoon, Enver. So ever since we did our season predictions, I said I want to see Lando upset people because that to me is the thing that the character traits that I'm not seeing from him between the Lando we see today and the Lando world champion that everyone says that he's got the driving talents to be. And I just, having watched Formula One for 17 years now at this point, and I think about all the champions and I think about all of the documentaries I've watched about champions since before I watched the sport, all of the season reviews, all of the games I've played, the books I've read. I just don't see traits from those previous champions in Lando. So is that A, Lando is a unique driver who is going to break the mold in terms of being a world champion? Or is Lando missing something? And I don't think I'm the only person in the world right now saying that Lando is missing an edge, if you want to call it an edge, a line that you do not cross with him. I don't see from Lando when he loses a guy who's that upset with coming second or third. If I compare to Lewis, who I've followed his whole career, I've seen Lewis win Grand Prix and look devastated up on the podium because something wasn't right with that race. And it's just, I never, like, for example, in Bahrain with Lando, in the week where he was trying to convince everybody that the McLaren wasn't that fast, and he was saying, oh, Max can come and test our car if he wants, and he can see it's not that fast. And then when he didn't qualify on pole, he said, oh, Oscar will probably lap the field. I'm like, mate, you're supposed to be the big dog, the alpha. You're trying to break people in this sport. Yes, it's a team sport, but it's a very like one-on-one macho sport for all of its reputation of being nerdy. And I just don't see that from Lando. I see a guy who is more bothered about making people laugh and cracking a joke and making sure that everyone's always smiling. And okay, that's his natural persona, maybe. But my point is that it doesn't match up with what I've seen from other champions. So maybe we'll get into talking about some previous champions now, but you've been watching Formula One longer than I have. I guess the question is, who's the nicest world champion there's ever been? And can you think of a particularly nice, friendly, lovable Formula One world champion?
No. The easy answer is no. I can't think of anyone right off the cuff. If you think back, you get this different, I call it almost different generation, but I suppose it's also to do with, the kind of racing that was, relevant to that time. Like I showed a video last week of Senna punted Prost off the track at the Japanese Grand Prix, where they locked horns at that famous chicane there. Many instances where Senna was really way over the line, and that was a bit of ruthlessness that I think would definitely not be welcomed in today's Formula One. I think it would probably be banned after 2 races. But I can't think of anybody that was ever a nice guy and a champion at the same time. The question is, we're talking about eras now, the Senna era compared to, for example, today's era, with media and Netflix and X and Instagram. And you heard George Russell and Lando joking about making jokes with each other on Instagram in the cool down room. I mean, I thought, okay, maybe that's a bit over the top. Do you think in this new era, there's a place for us? I don't want to call it a softer driver, but a nicer guy kind of approach than there was in the old days. And I'll tell you what, in the old days, the fear or the risk of dying was much higher. The cars were much unsafer. The speeds were as high, but the cars were woefully unsafe. And today, the chances of getting seriously hurt are not that bad, not that big. So maybe it's becoming a little bit too easy. Like you said, I said it last week, it's like driving around a vacuum cleaner. And, if your vacuum cleaners, my vacuum cleaner is faster than your vacuum cleaner, I can be world champion regardless of my personality. Do you think the era of cars got anything to do with maybe allowing a guy like Lando to become a champion or not?
Well, I'm still not convinced that Lando will be a champion. I don't know if it's the era of cars. I think there's two things that go into it. If we pursue the narrative of Formula One drivers now are nicer than they used to be, there's two sides to that for me. Number one is that we're going through a new generation of drivers who are going to be born post the year 2000s. And generations change, and they've grown up in a very different world where things that were acceptable, this is something that rugby coaches have talked about. Famously, Warren Gatland talked about it with Wales, is the you can't be as direct with these people. And younger people are much more aware of the world around them. Whether you want to use the word entitled or whether you want to use the word whatever word you want to use. They don't just accept things. They don't just shut up and listen to their elders anymore. That's not how it works. And even I experienced that in my day job when we get graduates join us and they've got very high expectations of what the company can do for them rather than what they can do for the company. And it's just a changing mindset. So there's that side of it where these younger drivers who are coming in are going to be different. The other side of it is Formula One now makes money. So back in the day, Formula One, no one was making money in Formula One. So everybody who was in it as a pure racer, and it was a passion project, and they were spending their millions and millions and millions on these race cars to put these drivers in these cars to win. That was the only motivation. Whereas now in Formula One, people are making money. So you need to be marketable because if you're not marketable, you affect share prices of companies. You affect what brands want to be on your car. So if you're a unpleasant person, that's going to affect your marketability. So I think that kind of brings a level into it is the money coming into Formula One is going to take an edge off it because in some people's minds, losing the money is worse than losing the championship.
I didn't think of that. That's a good point. Yeah, well, on that subject, I want to go outside Formula One a little bit and talk about nice guys who were very good at it. Roger Federer, for example, probably one of the nicest guys off the tennis court. Rafa Nadal, one of the nicest guys off the tennis court. But on the tennis court, he was an absolute killer, a ruthless sportsman. Between Rafa Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer, they were number one for how many years altogether. Now, if you want to, extrapolate that to Formula One, is Lando off the track too similar to the Lando on the track? Whereas the other guys, look at Max Verstappen, he's going to become a dad now. He's much calmer than he used to be, but he's still on track. You don't mess with Max Verstappen. There's a line. He changes on track. Lewis Hamilton, the same thing. Off the track, he pursues, he's an activist. He pushes social issues. But on track, he does his best. And there's a ruthlessness, a cold-bloodedness almost, that I wonder if that is present in any form of Lando's personality, whether it's on track or off track.
Well, we haven't seen the evidence of it, have we? We haven't got the data to say that it's happened. Well, like I said in the season preview, I'm yet to see Lando do something that even remotely upsets anybody else. Okay, he's had a bit of a feud here and there with Max, but that's when Max has been the aggressor. Max is clearly the one clear example on the Formula One grid currently of a not nice guy, or generally, unless you're a Dutch fan or a Supermax fan, you don't like him. He's a quite easy to dislike character, and he's just won the last 4 world championships in a row. So, correlation is not causation, but there's definitely a correlation there. If we run it back, look at someone like Schumacher, was very happy. He was almost the ultimate win at all costs driver. The man who was willing to, let's call a spade, cheat in order to win, whether that was crashing into another car or parking his car across the track or whatever it was. Now, Alan Prost never had a reputation of being particularly lovable and friendly. Senna, as we spoke about last week, has examples of where he's done things that today would be considered very, very bad, like stuff that would get you banned from the sport. He did those things. And Niki Lauda, was he particularly known as a nice guy? He wasn't really. So all these examples going through history, and if we looked at other sports, it's a very niche one, but the one that I'm reminded of is Stephen Hendry in snooker. Was a guy who, when he was interviewed, he said the best that he felt when he was playing was when he had his foot on the opponent's throat, when he was 10 frames to 3 up in a final, 17 frames to 2 up, and he knew he was destroying his opponent, not just on the table, but he was crushing their spirit. He said that's when he felt the best. And that just, you have to be, to achieve the top in anything, you have to be a bit weird. You have to be a bit twisted. Again, in snooker, Ronnie O'Sullivan's a big example of that, of the snooker part of his brain is genius, what like nothing we've ever seen. The rest of his brain maybe lets him down every now and again. And are there Formula One drivers like that? Maybe Oscar's a little bit like that. Maybe not to an extreme, but his like levelness, his complete almost robotic nature suggests that like the Formula One bit of him is just overtakes absolutely everything. To be a high achiever, you need to be obsessed with something and you need to be a little bit off. Cristiano Ronaldo in football is another example of this. A guy who's obsessed with being the best he can possibly be and obsessed with being the best in the world ever is his goal. And he sacrifices everything else in his life. And he's also not known for being a particularly nice guy. So this data set that we're building up of champions suggests that they're not particularly likable. I actually think, as a Lewis Hamilton fan, I think Lewis would have won more than he currently has if he had a bit more ruthlessness in him. If he had a bit more Michael Schumacher in him, I think he would have won more. I think he's rolled over for his teams on occasions where he shouldn't, where he's let his team make a decision that he knew was wrong in the name of being a team player, and that's cost him wins and cost him victories. I think one of the big mistakes I think of Lewis's career is he's allowed his teams to appoint him teammates who they were giving an equal footing, whether that be Jenson Button, whether that be Nico Rosberg, whether that be George Russell, where if that was Schumacher, he would have said, no, absolutely not. I'm not having this guy in this car next to me. So so that's where Lewis is almost a bit of an anomaly in terms of not, he's been hyper successful, but he could have been, in my opinion, more successful if he was meaner, if he was more more of the ruthless edge in him that someone like Schumacher had. So yeah, and then Lewis, obviously a lot of people don't like Lewis, but a lot of people like him a lot, and I'm one of the people who likes him a lot. So
I would never have been able to tell. But I think the big question for me is whether you're a nice guy or not a nice guy. The issue is, can you handle pressure? Can you handle adversity? Can you handle a setback? And whether you're a nice guy or not doesn't matter. It's how you handle it. And I think that, to me, more than anything, is where Lando actually falls a bit short. Senna, let's go back to Senna, used to thrive on being under pressure. When something went wrong, he stepped up. It made him better. Whereas with Lando, look at 2021 Sochi Grand Prix, where he made the call not to come in when it started to rain, and he was distraught afterwards. Every single press conference where it didn't go well, he would berate himself. And you cannot tell me, I'm not a psychologist, but you cannot tell me that does not have an influence on you. And it doesn't have an effect on you. We saw it this year. How many times when in qualifying he had to step up when Piastri or Max, for that matter, threw down the gauntlet and took pole position away from me. All he had to do was, be fast in the car. But it was probably the fastest car the entire weekend, and then he cannot do it. So what I'm getting at is, can a nice guy handle adversity? He most certainly can. Can Lando, the nice guy, handle adversity? I'm starting to agree with you. I don't think he can.
yeah, and that's it's kind of the major drama of being a Lewis Hamilton fan. That's why being a Lewis Hamilton fan is such it gets you so deep, is because Lewis has never been a robot. He's never been the driver like Max could do or Sebastian Vettel could do to win 10 races on a row in a row. Lewis will never do that because he has down days. And Lewis is, his motto is still I rise. And he always talks about how his dad told him, it's not how you fall, it's how you get back up. And Lewis stumbles. He does stumble and he has to get back up. And that's what makes it so personal for you as a fan of his, is when he does dip down and he has a bad weekend, he really feels it. And then everybody piles in on top of him and everyone says, this proves that he was never that good. And then he comes back and he performs. And that feeling of, no, he's proved it again that he is that guy. That's what makes it so intoxicating being a Lewis Hamilton fan. That's what makes you so convinced that he is the greatest, because the adversity that he has to overcome is greater than any other driver, and he has to do it more regularly than any other driver. He's perfectly imperfect. He's the driver that people will die for because of that trait in him.
Yeah, one thing about history, it tends to repeat itself. In the late 80s, Ayrton Senna and Alan Prost, two very strong personalities. Senna, the intense, almost religiously driven driver, and Alan Prost, the professor, the cool guy, but also a take no prisoner kind of guy. And it ended up tearing McLaren apart to a degree. And I'm starting to wonder whether this Oscar Lando thing isn't going to go the same way. Oscar, we saw it again this weekend. I think Martin Brundle said he's so laid back, he's horizontal. And when they asked him, remember to have a drink every now and again, he said, "Yeah, I would if it was working." But nothing perturbs him. There's the word I was looking for. And the the same car, the fastest car on the grid, with a driver that's slightly flawed but very nice, and another driver who doesn't get affected by anybody, who might be slightly slower in terms of outright speed than the nice guy. Who do you think is going to win at the end of the day? Who's going to carry the day?
At the moment, as we sit here after the Bahrain Grand Prix, I think the power is with Oscar. Absolutely. I think I spoke about how Lando has failed to break Oscar. I think we're now on the precipice of Oscar breaking Lando. If he, for another couple of races, he keeps piling on the pressure, he keeps bringing the pole positions, he keeps bringing the wins, and Lando keeps putting it sixth on the grid. And then, like you said, how affected is Lando when he has to go in front of the press and explain himself? Whereas you get the kind of impression that Oscar, I think the thing with Oscar is he'll never be a champion that transcends the sport because he's just that level. He's just that unemotional that, like what I just described with Lewis, with people getting so invested in him, I don't think people will do that to the same extent with Oscar. But I think as a sportsman, it serves him well in terms of his desire to succeed. And I think because of that robotic nature, I think right now Lando is looking across the garage at him, not knowing how to break this guy. Like he's probably Lando's lying awake at night thinking, I don't know how to
Mm.
break my teammate, and I don't see how it's going to happen. He's relying on Oscar crumbling in some way, and we've not seen the evidence that Oscar's going to do that.
Very interesting thing that you mentioned there, because remember earlier you said about they have to be Instagram ready and they have to be role models and brand ambassadors and everything else, but they also have to be characters. Lando's a character. Max is a character. Lewis is a character to a degree. Oscar, I'm not sure if he is a character. And that might count against him at the end of the day. And I know I hear what you're saying. I'm actually now an Oscar supporter, but I'm not getting excited about him like I used to get about Senna and Mika Hakkinen in those days. I've always been a McLaren supporter, or even Lewis when he was driving for McLaren. You miss that emotional component of somebody who's more of a robot than anything else, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, it's true of any sport really, because it's the hearts and minds thing.
Mm.
Oscar can win your mind, but is he going to win your hearts? Right now, I don't think he's started to win anybody's hearts. Whereas Lando, I think it is fair to say that he has won people's hearts. Lando fans very much exist, but has he won anybody's mind?
No,
Don't
good
think so.
question.
And it's the ones who win your heart and your mind who are the ones that you will go into battle for. And I think the battle is coming to McLaren, and I think it's going to be awkward for Zach Brown because I think that Zach Brown's grand plan was that Lando was going to be the one. It's not working out that way.
It's a very good point that it's not working out that way. Lando was supposed to be the crown prince, but Lando's going to be the placeholder, and Oscar's going to be the man. Oscar's going to be the king. That's how it's going to play out. And I'm wondering, I want to talk to you about Max next. The rumors about Max leaving, and I know Zach was raving about his drivers and everything else, but let's say Max comes knocking at McLaren's door. We know no Mercedes is probably off the table. It's probably going to be Aston Martin if it happens. But if you were Zach, knowing what you know about these drivers we just talked about, would you push any of them out to make way for somebody like a Max Verstappen, a super character, probably the best driver on the grid at the moment, ruthless, got all the traits that we just talked about. Would you, if you were Zach Brown, bring him into your team with all the destructive whatever things that he brings with him?
If I'm Zach Brown, I'm looking around at the McLaren as it is today, and I'm thinking where this team was when I took it over to where it is now is a huge turnaround. And I have built this team from back of the grid to front of the grid. I'm not going to bring in someone who could destroy it.
Mm.
I'm not going to bring in, because you're not just bringing in Verstappen, you're bringing in Verstappen Jr., you're bringing in Verstappen Senior, you're bringing in the PK family. It's an entourage, it's a camp, it's a Panzer tank you're inviting into your home. And it will drive around and trample on things, and it will crush things, and it will make demands. And I think Zach will look at his constructor's trophy in the cabinet and think, do I need that? And is that how I want to see my empire? Empire is probably the wrong word. Is this how I want to see my castle fall down? So I think if I was Zach, that's not something that I'd be looking at.
Last personality I really want to talk to you about is this same Max. Max, how many teammates has he gone through now? Yes, the car is a bit unpredictable or undrivable because it's suited to him, matched or tailored to him specifically. But I mean, he breaks his teammates psychologically, mentally. Why do you think that is? What does he do? Is it maybe because they think if he can do that, well, I'm just as good as a driver. I must be able to do it. And they keep falling short and then they start berating themselves like Lando does. Is that what it is about? Or is there something more to Max in that ruthless side of him that he actually, why is he destroying his teammates?
I think there's loads of things to it. I think number one, he's very, very, very fast, which at the end of the day, there's not, if he's just faster than you, there's not much you can do about it. I don't know. I can imagine he can be intense in team meetings. And I can, if you think about the culture that we know that there is at Red Bull, I think Max is comfortable swimming in an acidic pool. I think he's comfortable being in a toxic culture and knows how to make that work for him. As I said, he's got a clan behind him. He's got a machine behind him of his dad who's willing to go out into the press and say whatever it needs to be said. He's willing to declare war. His family said things about Checo plenty of times, and he knows how to make allies with the most powerful person in the room. And the thing about Max is he's on it all the time. That's something that Daniel Ricciardo said about him, is that this guy would be going out in FP1 and pushing 100%, 10 out of 10 from the first lap in FP1. He'd be like, God, what is this guy's problem? And that just gets on your nerves. It gets under your skin after a while. You just get sick of seeing his name above yours on the timing screen. So I just think there's a relentlessness to him, and there's a he knows how to play dirty. Well, I don't know dirty. Yeah, no, I stick with it. Dirty. He knows how to play dirty,
Mhm.
and that you can never let your guard down. And I think that must just be exhausting. Must just be exhausting being in that environment.
Yeah, I hear you. Right, knowing what we know now, McLaren being the fastest car, let's assume it's going to stay that way. Hendrik, our colleague, predicted earlier this year, his forecast for the year is Oscar was going to be the champion, and I'm starting to come around to his point of view. What do you think? Which of those two drivers do you think in McLaren will end up, on top, or do you think Lando is basically fatally flawed?
Oh, I think Oscar all day long. I can see Lando spiraling, honestly, at some point.
I
I
could, yeah.
think if his head drops, I think he could just get into a death spiral and start like if you look at Bahrain where he made a meal out of passing Charles Leclerc, should have got past him way easier,
Mm.
messed up one overtake so badly. His wheel to wheel racing was really lacking. And then wasn't able to get past George, and George's car was falling apart electronically around him at the time. And I could just see that those second places turning into third places, turning into fourth places, turning into fifth places, turning into sixth places. And his confidence just nosedives. And Oscar strings a few wins together because I think of the two of them, if you ask me who the robot is, it's clearly Oscar. And then Oscar just stays in the top two every single race of the season. And before you know it, the gap is starting to look daunting. So that's the way I see it going at the moment.
Someone else I forgot to mention in terms of being a nice guy. He's the same just George Russell you just referred to. He is a nice guy off the track, but he does have a bit of a ruthless streak in him. He's tougher on track than Lando is, don't you think?
Yeah, George is interesting. They call him PR63. He's clearly got the beef with Max, and he's never going to yield to Max. That's clear. when he was teammates with Lewis, it was very clear. He made it very clear that all that mattered to him was finishing ahead of Lewis. He didn't care if he finished P19, as long as Lewis finished P20, he didn't care. That's all that mattered to him. And George was willing to take the Hail Mary. He was willing to go for a one stop when everyone else was on a three stop. He was willing to do whatever it was, take risks on the safety cars and things to try and get those wins. Does he have quite the streak to get to the top? I think that obsession with beating Lewis kind of told a story where Lewis has never been obsessed with another driver. Other drivers have been obsessed with him, but he's never been obsessed with another driver. And I think that George's world is a little bit small at the moment. I don't think he thinks on a global scale. I think so long as he looks good in his own team and he keeps on, if he can turn around and say, I've finished in the top 5 for 15 races in a row, or whatever it is, I think he'd take that. So I don't think that necessarily George has eyes for the World Championship. And he might say that he does, but I'm not sure that he has it in him to get to the very top. It's difficult to articulate.
And the last thing, I promise, these little, I want to almost say kids driving the Formula One lately. Kimi Antonelli, he seems to be quite a character, and saw him driving the way the lines he takes. He's quite aggressive. He's a bit ruthless. Never thought I'd see it in an 18-year-old boy, because that's what he is. And that seems to be a bit of a trait there. Isaac Hadjar, I mean, I never even knew the name a little bit, but what I see on the track impresses me. Bartletta was a champion. He's got a donkey of a car. He seems to impress me, never gives up. Doing, we have a weekly doing death watch to see if he's still got his seat or not. These young drivers, the new generation, do you think they're different again? Like you mentioned right in the beginning, the younger people going back to that more not being told what to do, being more independent, being more assertive. Is that what we're seeing that coming to the fore now?
You don't see much of the ones who are lower down the grid. You kind of, like I've said it before, that even Mercedes are raking in the podiums at the moment, but no one's really talking about them particularly. So it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind, and they're going to be managed so much. I like Ollie Beerman. I will say that I've been impressed with him. I think he's done a good job, and he's clearly somewhat fearless. But it's like very, very few. When we talk about generational talents, we had Alonso, Lewis, kind of Jenson Button is kind of the odd one out, really. And then you had the Vettel era, then Lewis again, and then Max. So they don't come around very often. We've only had, I guess Rosberg was in there, but you've had.
No, but
if you look at when these champions made their debuts, you got Max Verstappen made his debut in 16, and then you had 15, and then you had Lewis. Vettel in 2008, Lewis in 2007, Rosberg in 2006, and then Alonso back in 2001. So you're starting to get, so that's 5, well, that's what, 5 world champions, and now you're getting back to the 90s by the time you get a world champion. So they don't come along very often.
And if they do, they stick around. They dominate, like you just said. That's why I said Rosberg doesn't count for me. Even Button doesn't count. Once Raikkonen won the world champions in 2007 when Alonso and Hamilton were taking each other out. He won it by 1 point. I mean, to me, he's never really been a champion. If those two weren't going at it hammer and tongs, one of the McLaren drivers would have been the champion. There's no doubt about it. So I agree with you. Anyway, enough about that. That was very interesting. I appreciate it. Thanks, man.
My pleasure.
The F1 Focus Podcast with Envia Velman and Huw Griffin.